August 21st, 1984. This is Joe Todd and Brice Jackson, an interview with Mr. Bryce Jackson. Sir, where were you born?
In Greene County, Illinois.
And when's your birthday?
September 23rd, 1903.
1903. Who was your father?
John H. Jackson.
And your mother?
Sarah Ann was her name. Hopper was her maiden name.
I'm sorry?
Hopper.
Hopper. Were they both from Illinois?
Yes.
Okay. What kind of work did your father do?
He was a farmer.
Farmer. Tell us, as a little boy, what chores you do in the farm.
Well, anything that came up, a lot of it was done on the hoe. It was a big family and we raised lots of garden.
How big was the farm?
80 acres.
80 acres. What was the main chores that you did besides work the garden?
Well, I milked the cows, fed hogs. I fed hogs ever since I was big enough to throw near a corn over the fence.
What kind of hogs you raised?
At first, they were black Poland Chinas. And later, he went to the George Jersey.
Mm-hmm. What were the main crops that you raised in the farm?
Corn.
Corn. How many acres did you have in corn?
Usually about 30.
About 30. When you plowed, you used a walking plow?
Yes.
Did you plow with horses or mules?
Horses.
Okay. How many acres could you plow in one day?
About 2.5 was a good day's work.
Mm-hmm.
And you could plow 3 if you get up early and move right along.
Ever plow with mules?
Not until I was a grown man.
Okay. When did you start school?
Where?
Where?
Oh, a little country school called Brush College.
Brush College. How far is that from the house?
120 rods.
How many students?
Usually around 30 to 40, sometimes more than 40.
Was that all 8 grades?
Yes, 8 grades.
One room schoolhouse?
One room.
What did the inside of that schoolhouse look like?
Well, it was lined with, although we call them ceiling boards, I guess. It was wood. It wasn't a plastered building. It's tongue and grooved boards.
What was the teacher's name?
Well, we had several of them. My first teacher's name was T.G. Beagles.
How does one teacher teach all 8 grades?
Well, that's a little hard to answer. They had different methods, different teachers. Sometimes in reading classes, they put 2 or 3 grades in one class.
Mm-hmm. Would the older students help the younger students?
Some.
Mm-hmm.
That involved whispering in the schoolroom. Sometimes that was permitted, sometimes it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. How far did you go through school? How many years?
8.
8. Do you remember World War I?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about it.
Now, I can remember when it started in August of 1914, when it started in Europe.
Mm-hmm. That was this with the assassination of...
Oh, he was a nobleman there in one of those little Balkan countries. I don't remember.
the Archduke Ferdinand.
Mm-hmm. Austria.
Yeah. Were you still in school when the war was going on?
Yes.
Did the school have any organized effort to support the war?
No.
Mm-hmm.
In the spring of 17, we had a young man teaching the school, a very fine young fella, and as soon as school was out, he enlisted in the army and went to France almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
He was there in time for that Saint Mahil salient, I believe they called it, the first action of American troops against the German army.
Mm-hmm.
He was in that.
Tell me about Armistice Day.
Well, I remember that my father had gone to the county seat on business that day. He rode a horse 8 miles and a half and left him there and got on the train and went another 11 miles. He made the round trip that day, and we didn't have radios, but there was a special edition of the paper. Came out about shortly after noon. And we boys were in the field shucking corn. It was a bright autumn day, real nice day, I can remember that. Yeah, I was 14 years old, I guess, at that time.
And your father came home with the newspaper?
And he came home with the news of the activity in town. He couldn't hardly conclude his business that he went to town for because everybody was so excited and they were celebrating all up and down the street.
So did you all go in town and join them?
No. When you went to town those days, it was quite a little trip to go 20 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have a car. Just a lot of people didn't have cars those days.
Right. How come you decided to come to Oklahoma?
Well, I didn't have very good health in Illinois.
Tell them about your trip up in North Dakota.
I had gone to North Dakota in the spring of 21 and was there until about the 1st of November. And I had very poor health up until that time. I regained my health there and got along pretty well for 2 or 3 years. And then I got scared again. I was threatened with TB. So I came to Oklahoma. I was on my way to California. I thought I would come to Oklahoma and work till autumn and then go on to California. But I put in 7 months in North Dakota. I liked the country there. In the summertime, it was just not only too cold in the winter, but it's cold too long. But it was an invigorating climate. You felt like getting up and doing things. And wages were really good up there. I got $40 a month. I was just 17 years old. I hired this man for $35 a month.
What kind of work were you doing?
Farm work.
Farm work?
And that fall, when he paid me off, I hadn't drawn any money during the summer. I didn't need any money, only a little for clothes. When he paid me off, he gave me a $5 a month bonus. So he said I had done as much work as a man would do, and he paid me a man's wages. That was good wages those days.
What part of North Dakota was that?
About 20 miles west of Grand Forks.
Grand Forks. And then from there you came to Oklahoma?
I went back to Illinois and didn't come to Oklahoma until 1924.
1924. Where did you settle in Oklahoma?
In Beaver County.
Beaver County. What town?
Well, the address of my first landed there was Spearmore, but Spearmore faded away, and I got a mail out of Laverne for a while till I bought a farm and moved closer to Follett, Texas. I got my mail out of Follett, Texas.
Mm-hmm. And when did you meet your wife?
In
He's forgotten.
is in 29.
1929. Where'd you meet her?
I believe I met her first at a party at her grandfather's.
Well, the first time I saw him, he was in a play at the Lovell Schoolhouse. And he stepped out on the stage, and I had never seen him, didn't know he was such a man in the country. I was away at school. And I asked people, well, who is that man? I don't know him. Well, I sure want to meet him. But I didn't meet him for a while until at this party that he mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't remember me at this play.
When did y'all get married?
In the 15th of March of 1930.
In the first part of the Depression.
Yes.
You still farming then?
Yes. I've never done anything else but farm.
How did the Depression affect you and your family?
Well, we were flat broke, but we didn't know it. Nobody else had anything either, so we just coasted along until times got better.
Were you ranching or farming out there?
Farming mostly.
Farming. What were you raising?
Mostly wheat.
Wheat. Tell me about wheat harvest.
Well, the first 3 years that I was here, I worked with a header crew. It took about 7 men, 10 horses, a header, and 2 barges. And I worked the first 3 harvests with a header barge. Then by that time I was going to farming for myself, and I bought a combine.
The step-propel combine?
No, they weren't in existence yet. I bought a pull-type combine, pulled it with 8 horses and mules, and 4 horses and 4 mules.
Mm-hmm. That combine replaced how many pieces of equipment?
Well, really it only replaced one. With a header crew, you had a header and 2 barges. There's three pieces of equipment. With a combine, you had the combine, and you had that wagon to haul your grain to the bin with.
Did the combine replace the thresher also?
Yes.
Threshing machine? Tell me about the dust storms.
Well, I was out in the dust a lot because I tried to keep the land from blowing. Get out and rough it up with whatever you could use on it. Sometimes you could do it with a disc, sometimes a lister.
Someone mentioned one time a process called chiseling. You familiar with that?
Yes, but we didn't have chisels yet.
The one storm I'm thinking of is Black Sunday. That was in April of 35, I think.
Yes.
Tell me about that storm.
Well, you can talk all day and you can't convey the real picture. It was a real nice day, still and warm. And it came up suddenly from the northwest and just blacked out everything as it came. We were sitting on the back step of a house. I went to shut the windmill off. Brice took John and went to the house. And I couldn't see the house, only 2 or 3 rods from the well when I started back, but of course I could walk right straight to it. And I got inside, I couldn't see them for a while.
Where were they inside the house?
Yeah. Yes,
I mean,
they were inside the house.
Where were they in the house?
They were in the kitchen.
In the kitchen?
That was the first place you could find a chair to sit down as you went in.
How'd you find her?
My voice.
How long did the dust storms last?
Well, sometimes it lasts for 24 hours or longer. But that one didn't last that long.
It didn't? Okay. What caused the dust storms?
Drought and wind.
And how many years did they continue?
Oh, about 6 or 7 years.
What about World War II? What were you doing during the war?
Well, that was farming.
Yeah. You do any work for the war effort?
Oh, I sold bombs. Canvassed the country and sold bombs. I was just a little too old for the army. I would have been there, I guess. Just a little too young for World War I. Too old for the next one.
Tell me about the tornado of 1947.
Well, we didn't know anything about it for the next day.
Where were you living then? Out
We
in
were
Beaver
living out
County?
in Beaver County
Yeah.
on the farm. And at the time that storm was on, I think John and I were in the barn milking.
I was doing feeding.
We,
I was doing feeding, you doing milking, because you could help milk
Could you
Mhm.
see the storm from where you were?
We didn't even look for it.
Yeah.
It was a good ways from us. You know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The only thing we could see was the big black clouds and hear the thundering and see the lightning and then the high wind out of the south. And that was it. But as far as the tornado itself, couldn't see.
Mm-hmm. You told me that you had, was it an uncle in the Civil War?
Yes, I had two of them.
What were their names?
Well, one of them was named Duggar, Elvis Duggar. He had been in the Army about 3 weeks, I believe he said, when he hit the Battle of Shiloh. He said they got badly whipped the first day. He said they were actually backing them off into the river. And they'd throw their guns away and swim for it in their retreat. But in the night, they brought up reinforcements, crossed them over the river in the night. The evening before, when the fighting settled down, he had one ear shot loose from his head and was hanging down like a dog's ear, he said. And one boy sewed it up with a needle and thread, just a common needle and thread. And he went back in with the bayonet the next morning. And they won the battle the second day.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went on with Sherman to the sea.
Did he talk about that march to the sea?
No, he didn't tell anything about that. Only when the war was over, they had a big victory parade through the streets of Washington. And he was a homesick boy. He didn't see any need of him staying around and make a march like that, so he just took out and went home without a discharge. And the war being over, they didn't bother him. But when he got old and wanted a pension, he had to prove that he had a military record. And he got in touch some way with some of the boys that were older men. He was only 16 when he went in, and they took turns carrying his pack for him. And one of them even carried him on his back one day for a while. He played out. He said the boys 18 to 20 stay in there just like the men. But he was just a little too young. He wasn't very big either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had another uncle. He was a great uncle,
What was his name?
John Brown.
John Brown?
Yes. He was at the Battle of Pea Ridge, Arkansas. But he didn't fight there. He was in the cavalry. And they had been on scouting duty all night long. They had ridden hard all night. And they got in just after daylight. And the battle started almost immediately. And those boys that had been out on duty all night, they put them to guarding prisoners. And he said he was in full view of the battle, but he didn't get into the fight. He guarded prisoners.
Did he ever talk about the battle, how it went?
The only thing I ever heard him tell was a beautiful sorrel mare of blazed face and white stockinged legs. This rebel soldier got cut off from his outfit. How that mare could run. he made it back to his line.
Mm-hmm. Anything else about the Civil War?
Well, he got sick. They discharged him and sent him home. And he got straightened up where he was physically able. He went back and enlisted in the light artillery. And he went down into the deep south somewhere, I don't remember, I think Tennessee, where he saw his next action.
After the Battle of Pea Ridge, he wasn't in the Battle of Honey Springs, was he?
No,
After Pea Ridge? Okay.
but he had a brother, but I didn't ever meet him.
Mm-hmm.
He was gone before my day. And he had fought in the Mexican War, and he fought also in the Civil War.
Did they ever talk about the Mexican War?
No, I never did see the ones that was in the Mexican War. My grandfather, my great grandfather, my grandmother's father,
Mm-hmm.
he was in the Black Hawk War and in the Mexican War too. He and his oldest son
Yeah.
were in the Mexican War, but I never heard anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw any of my grandparents, but one of them, I saw one of them once.
What was your great-grandfather's name?
His name was Brown, but I don't remember his first name.
We were talking about the dust storms,
Mhm.
and he was talking about going out and turning the windmill off,
Mhm.
and said you went in the house.
Mhm.
Tell us what you did after you went in the house.
You had that already on tape somewhere. Well, I took John by the hand and we got inside the house before it got so dark that I couldn't see him. And I remembered where a certain chair was sitting, and I headed for that chair. And I found it, and I sat down, and I put John on my lap, and I couldn't see him. That dirt was so thick. The air was just so thick and saturated with that dirt. It was hard to breathe because you were just breathing dirt all. And I got worried about Bryce. He hadn't come in yet. He'd gone to shut the windmill off. And I didn't know whether I should go look for him. And if I did find him, I couldn't see him. And I thought, well, maybe I'd better just sit here and take care of John. And pretty soon Bryce said, "Where are you?" And he was standing right there beside of me and couldn't see me. And I reached out and touched him. And he said, "Oh, there you are." So he kind of squatted down on his heels there by my chair. And we couldn't see each other. Couldn't see a thing. Just like the blackest night you ever saw. And finally he got choked. And he managed to get over to we had a Perfection oil stove, 4-burner with the oven that set off, and that gave me 4 ovens or 4 burners to cook on. And he got a pan of water and put that on the stove and held his nose right down over that steam. And he got to where he wasn't so choked. And then it began to get light to where we could see outline of objects in the house. And then all the dirt blew past the windows. You couldn't see the barn, you couldn't see any outbuildings. And finally, how long do you think it really lasted? 10, 15 minutes? Did it last that long? It lasted fully 10 minutes. Did it last any longer than that?
Yes, I think it lasted probably 30 minutes.
Before we could see anything?
Yes.
I know it was a long, long time but anything like that seems longer really than what it is. Then it began to clear up, and we could see the outline of the barn. And it came in from the north, and the dirt from down the driveway past the house. And we had cleaned that house from top to bottom that morning. It was a beautiful sunny morning. And my house, oh, it was dirty. That whole house, which we had just worked so hard to get cleaned up from the dirt storm of the day before.
I've heard of people using like a damp rag over the face to breathe.
Yes, some people did.
Did you do anything to try to keep the dirt out of the house?
We didn't have time. It was on us before we knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could not keep that fine dust out of the house. We would chink the windows with paper. We tried paper, rolling it up and pushing it in, you know. And then we'd try take strips of cloth and put paper inside of that, but you could not keep that fine dust out. Some of it got in anyway. And when we would fix our meals, I would leave everything in the kettles until ready to serve. And everybody'd be ready to eat. Then I would get the plates out of the cupboards and wipe them off, set them down on the table, and just set the food on as fast as we could, and we'd eat just fast as we could. Then I'd put everything away. And we'd wash the dishes and get them away. But of course they would be dusty by next meal time, even in the cabinets with the door shut. And I'd go through the same process again for the next meal. And one day the wind would come from the north. That was the day Kansas came by. And then the next day it'd come from the south. And that was when Texas was coming by. And it was that way for weeks after weeks. And Bryce would go out with his horses, and I tried to get him not to. It looked foolish to me. He'd take the lister and he would make furrows. Did you tell them that? In the field. And the next day those furrows would be full. And that dust was so fine that you couldn't control it. Just couldn't control it.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
We began, did you tell him, in 1935, we began to get a little money from the wheat crops. And
Well, we didn't get anything much out of wheat crop till 38. That's the first crop I had an on to. So it was 38.
but we did raise a little feed crop.
Hmm.
Did you tell him about working on the WPA?
Well, I worked out $140 there one winter. I got 5 we graded road. There was another crew that had scrapers and moved dirt that way. But my job was to help pull the grader. I had 4 horses on the grader, and another neighbor there had 4, made 8.
Mm-hmm. John, do you have any questions?
Now, there's one thing about that Black Sunday that to me, of course, I wasn't very big, but it stayed in my mind. Now, they never mentioned about lighting a kerosene lamp sitting on the kitchen table. They did, because I can remember seeing that glow. And that was all it was, just a glow in the dark. It didn't really light up anything. You just had glow out here sitting on the table.
Well,
That's what sticks in my mind about that
we
day.
didn't light it for a while, did we?
Well, it was dark enough that it didn't show anything except just a glow out there on the table about the size of a silver dollar. It wasn't very big. It didn't light the room up at all.
But we didn't light it at first, because you and I went to the chair.
No, Dad was the one that lit it
I heard
after
that.
he come in the house.
Yes.
But I do remember that glow. That's about it. I can remember the windmill running, and all once he just whipped the mill around to the northwest. And Dad headed for the windmill, and Mom and I went to the house. But when Dad come in, he didn't hit that back door. He hit the southwest corner of the house, because that's why I remember him saying that.
Yeah, I'd feel for the door after I hit the house.
But as far as that Black Sunday, that's all I remember about it.
Okay,
It
well,
was one of the worst dust storms I ever saw. I didn't see so many of them.
I think
But,
they considered that one the worst one, Black Sunday.
Yeah.
Well, one of the worst ones I ever saw was in North Dakota in the month of May of 1921.
Worse than this Black Sunday?
Oh no, it was among the worst. It was as bad as any we had here, but it just lasted about 2 or 3 hours one afternoon.
The main thing made that Black Sunday so bad was the fact it started in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Or started up there in that South Dakota area.
You want to go ahead and tell about your trips to the Mayo Clinic?
No, they're not pleasant memories for me or anyone.
Okay, well, thank you.